of all, concepts and definition. We found ourselves within a quite broad, complex, even interdisciplinary literature dealing with the stuff of energy resilience and vulnerability. Dependency, intended as import dependency of specific energy goods, is one of the components, but of course not the only one. So the first thing that is important to understand is that we need a, so to say, conceptual or theoretical framework that allows identifying all the key components of the domain that we are investigating. And here we put forth two key definitions that are in the literature concerning energy vulnerability. So when we discuss energy vulnerability, we are thinking at how an energy system or an entity is likely to get exposed to adverse events or to fall into traps, as the literature says, while on the other end, energy resilience can be understood as the ability of an energy system to retain, react, overcome to the perturbations caused by a shock. But as you can see here, and of course in the papers, then there will be all the details and also the interconnections between these elements. And if you like, here there is also the broader macro context that is not always explicitly taken into account, but that this is crucial to be understood. And so we divided the theoretical conceptual elements of the two broader domains, distinguishing between what regards energy availability, so security of supply and production. In bold, you have the dimensions that then Francesco will show you in terms of empirical indicators and of mapping of the positioning of European economies, while what is not in bold are things that are included, broadly speaking, in energy vulnerability and resilience, but that we do not touch upon from an supply and production. So an example could be energy reserves, of course. Then you have import dependency that has been already mentioned and that needs to be properly assessed, as you will see. Then there is the element of diversification, both on the supply and on the demand side. But of course, when we talk about the positioning of countries, we need also to care about how the production, the distribution, the infrastructural dimension is set. And so the technological efficiency and the technological capabilities, more broadly speaking, domain is another crucial part of the story. And so we have to take into account the relative positioning of countries and even of region in terms of R&D and innovation related to the green domain, safety and reliability, the relative resilience of infrastructure and systems related to energy production and supply, energy efficiency, that of course is one of the key indicators also when we assess the progresses concerning the energy transition. And then there is an element which of course is crucial of investment, but also of employment, intended also in terms of competencies, skills, and the labor supply that is needed to put forth the energy transition. And then there is also the element, of course, of the potential employment consequences of a transition or of restructuring that do not go in the right direction in terms of their economic implications. So in the paper, we try to transpose, so to say, this broad set of complex elements to a certain extent are also related to the technical dimensions of the energy domain, broadly speaking, to issues that are more understandable from an economic point of view. So we distinguish between supply side elements that need to be taken into account in order to assess the situation of Europe as a whole and of different countries more specifically. So their energy mix, the relative share of energy intensive industries, that of course is crucial to understand what dimension of the restructuring is expected for different countries. The situation in terms of technological capabilities and of course of production and resources in terms of renewable energies. Then the demand side is also crucial. So the energy portfolio, so what kind of energy is demanded by the private sector, but also by the government. And then the policy dimension, because key heterogeneities may characterize, and in fact, in the European case, characterize nation states and even regions in terms of the policies, both quantitatively and qualitatively, to address the consequences and to pursue the energy transition. So I'm going close to leaving the floor to Francesco. So before entering into the mapping, so all the things that I mentioned and that I briefly discussed so far, then are empirically addressed in a quite comprehensive and long-term detailed way via a large set of indicators. But before getting into each specific indicator and domain, it is important to have an idea about from where we come from concerning the broad macro energy related context, so to say. So first of all, it is important to understand what is the energy mix of the European Union as a whole. Here we report data from 1995 to 2022. And what you can see is that, in fact, there is a process of change concerning, for example, the relative reduction of the importance of oil within the energy sources that are used in the European Union, and an increase of renewables. However, the thing that we can also observe is the fact that, among other things, oil, coal, and gas, so the elements that we are willing to reduce concerning the relative importance within the energy portfolio, are still a major source of energy supply in the European Union, despite such increase in the use of renewables and other not irrelevant phenomena like the reduction, the relative reduction in the use of coal and the relative stability of nuclear. But as I said, this is also a story of huge heterogeneities. So when we look at Europe as a whole, we are not considering the fact that member states are highly heterogeneous concerning their specific situation. So this graph shows you how the energy profiles are heterogeneous across member states. So you have member states ordered by their relative share of renewables within the broad energy setup, energy mix, so to say. And as you can see, we have the northern Scandinavian countries that, as expected, are on the top, while then we have countries like Netherlands, Cyprus, Belgium, which are way differently positioned, and large countries like Italy and Germany that are of course crucial concerning the discussion on socioeconomic and employment and income and distributive implications are in the middle, and as we will see are in a situation that needs attention concerning the potential implications. And then I think, well, this graph is still me that I have to comment it. Another important context element, if you like, that we need to look at before entering into the specific mapping is what happened concerning relative energy efficiency, or on the other hand, energy intensity, because this is a measure of how much the industrial and productive structure of member state concerning the value that is produced, so 1 unit of GDP, is energy intensive, so needs efforts in terms of reduction of such energy intensity or not. And again, as you can see, we have two key take-home messages. The first is that energy intensity reduced throughout the period for more or less all countries, but that again, you have a strong heterogeneity. So the need for, so to say, well-tailored policy is clearly emerging. Of course, behind this, you have also processes of structural change characterizing how, from a sectoral point of view, economies changed over time, but we will address this throughout the presentation. So now we are ready to step into the more specific analysis that we carried out, focusing on a large set of elements characterizing what we define energy vulnerability and resilience, assessing import dependency and also import vulnerability when also the market concentration is taken into account. Of course, the share of energy intensive industry, and all the elements that then can contribute to increase resilience and so to reduce vulnerability, like technological capabilities, but also the policy domain. So the policy effort and the policy space that we can recognize in each member state in order to accelerate and fasten the energy transition. So Francesco, please, the floor is yours. That's all on my side.
Thanks, Dario. Everyone. So I'm going to show you in the next two slides a bunch of statistics. So the over for all European countries. So on the left, see the import dependency rate, which is defined as the net imports over the total energy country. So the gross available energy, which is available for consumption by households and firms. This is divided by a type of fuel. And so you see that the total, which is the gray line on the low part of the graph, is yes increasing, but not dramatically. This is so because, I mean, Europe has large quantities of solid fuels. It brings down the overall import dependency of the EU, which is, however, almost at 100% for oil, which we import almost Italy from outside the continent, and it is now at 100% also for gas. This started accelerated dramatically in 2014 when the Russia-Ukraine conflict started its initial start, and so we are now also completely dependent on gas import outside. Of course, we have changed it with our key suppliers. I'm going to show this in a minute. But again, there are large heterogeneities among countries, and this is shown on the right, which shows you the size of the import dependency rate for 2022. And as you can see, we have 2 or 3 Europes. So we have Italy with Netherlands, Belgium, Ireland, Greece, and Cyprus, all the red areas, different degrees, but which are very import dependent. And then we have Scandinavian countries and part of this so-called Visegrad bloc, which less import, but this again is due to the very high share of solid fuels in their energy mix, which allows them to import from. Of course, vulnerability. Let's have a lot of different elements inside. So here it's not just important how much we import of energy, but also where these imports are coming from. So we here combine 2 different indices. The first one is the import dependency from outside of the EU countries. And the second one is the import concentration, Hirschman, Erfidal indexes, to provide this new index, which we labeled as energy import vulnerability. So how to read this graph? So dotted lines are the median values, and so countries on the right are example have higher values for energy import vulnerability, and we plotted this against the standard import dependency index to see where countries are identify countries which have the higher risks. Of course, in this case, the countries which are on the height to the line are the one which faces higher risk, and the one in the top right quadrant faces most significant vulnerabilities among these countries. Lithuania, which is right to the you can find, followed by Ireland, Slovakia. But in this case, Germany, Italy are also quite at risk because they have high energy import dependency and an overall high vulnerability. Again, where we import from is also key. So this graph shows you the top 3 suppliers. So for oil and gas. So how to read this graph? Countries on the left-hand side are sorted. So European countries are sorted by the share of their top 10 suppliers. So all countries, we elected the top 3 suppliers imports, and countries on the right are sorted by the how much by the sum of the share of the singular European states. As you can see, Russia is a key supplier for both oil and gas. The second interesting thing is that the oil market is, of course, much more diversified. This is mostly due to logistic. Simple to ship oil from one country to another. It's more difficult to transport gas, especially if it's in liquid form, certain infrastructure, pipelines, and so on. And these are difficult to move from one place to another. So Russia is key still in 2022. No matter the decline in imports that we have seen in the last 2 years. So despite the sanctions, Russia still plays a key role. And I mean, in European policies, this is set to zero in the next decade. The objective, which we cover in a few. And of course, countries which are most reliant on gas face additional vulnerabilities. Because I was saying before, it's more difficult gas import oil. And for example, since the Russia-Ukraine war, that we, as European countries in general, we started to import more from the United States. Of course, United States gas is more expensive than Russia, so impacts in terms of affordability of energy, but those. Again, vulnerability and resilience are multifaceted concepts, so we need multiple indicators to assess them and to see where countries are as of 2022. So we here have 4 different graphs, which we read as the one that I showed you before. So the first one on top left plots the import dependency against energy intensity. You can see that countries right to the median face it's additional vulnerabilities. And of course, they should try to enhance energy efficiency technology, trying to improve energy efficiency so that energy intensity will reduce, so that you need less energy to be up. The second dimension is the what is the share of energy intensity? Of course, if a country is very industrialized and among the industrial structure, key industries which consume a lot of energy, steel plants consume a lot of gas because gas to finance. And of course, parentheses, if you look at energy intensity, the share of energy in industries over time, it has declined almost everywhere in Europe. Still, they are a large share for a bunch of poor countries, but also in Italy. So, in this sense, we are trying collectively improve the technological capability industries to reduce intensity production. But of course, graph on the left shows again share of renewables in gross available energy. And in this case, you can see that, for example, countries which are very import dependent and have a very low share of renewables, left quadrant, these are particularly vulnerable because they don't have renewables So, of course, the less renewable energy you have in your energy mix makes for you more difficult to diversify your energy sources. And finally, the technological part is also crucial. So the advantage in environment-related technologies is also key. In this case, you can see that the overall central and Eastern countries, but mostly Scandinavian countries, do have a relative advantage in technologies, while the southern periphery, you find almost all in the left quadrant, don't have these advantages, and they're also very interdependent. So they face the highest vulnerabilities, and therefore they have the lowest resilience toward energy shocks. Continuing on technologies, we here have the relative advantage that we had on our lower axis in the graph before. In this case, it's plotted against the accumulated public investment, green R&D. So in this case, you can see there is a huge heterogeneity among countries, with Denmark and Finland, which have investment per capita, which are higher than most other countries. But again, also Austria is a leader in this field with the Netherlands. So again, these are the countries where have. So, for example, we were talking about Finland, which is very import dependent, but since it has a very high public investment in R&D for green technologies, is more resilient than other countries. So, continuing on manufacturing. Yes.
Question for comprehension on the previous slide. Environment technologies, is it only energy, or is it also like circular economy technologies? This includes.
Okay, so the environmental technology, so these are data from EU Observer, which I think combines a lot of stuff in it. So
I think it's quite comprehensive. So there's
quite comprehensive.
plus circular related stuff, as well as, let's say, investment in solar panels and this kind of.
Yeah, it's a quite comprehensive database, and also it's quite difficult to entangle the various. So here we have data from Bruegel, and again from the JRC and EU Observer on the manufacturing capabilities among European countries. So a caveat on these figures on the left. Figures on the left count the industrial plants in European countries, but we don't have information of how much these plants produce. But still, data on employment, which you see below, have almost the same ranking for countries. So, some sense to look at the number of plants in different countries. And as you can see, the European market is very concentrated in just a few countries. So, Germany has by far the highest number of plants, and most of these are in wind and solar. Then you have Italy, Spain, and France, with Italy specialized in heat pumps and Spain in technologies. However, if you look at batteries, for example, which are the blue bars, as it's more to see, it's clearer if you look. Only 6 countries produce batteries. These are Germany, Spain, Poland, Hungary. But of course, now with European policies and actions, especially on batteries, the issue in the countries. However, if you look at our biggest competitor in terms of technologies, which is China, how European countries, in the employment part, are situated is very different. So this you can see on the graph on the right. So this looks at particularly at the solar sector. And here you have on the left the EU, on the right China, and where these employees are doing. So while in China, almost 66% of workers are employed in manufacturing or in the solar sector. In the EU, most of the employment is on the employment part, in the solar panels on buildings. Of course, this has the implications, which means that we are increasing a lot, for example, imports of green technologies, not increasing our domestic production, we're just in, and especially from, of course, can create some additional. And similar story can be seen from trade data. So these are data from Eurostat on imports of green energy products between 2012 and 2020 for wind turbines and solar panels. So as you can see, there has been a sharp increase in imports in solar panels, which is the yellow line graph. And of course, this is reflected by the huge importance of green technologies. So demand for this kind of lot, and very clear in the import data. Again, most of these imports are coming from China, and this also creates a critical strategic tendency.
Oh, it's a question, but I think we can collect them.
Yeah, we collect them for afterwards. Yeah. You might want to write your questions in the chat. Yeah,
they wrote it. Yeah. Okay. Francesco, go ahead.
So again, similar story for wind turbines. You see that the market is less concentrated in this case because half of some of the imports are coming from China, a large part is coming from India. And of course, we have different relationship. So we are a bit less resilient on this side. And we have to remember that Europe as a whole is a net exporter of wind turbines, especially Denmark, which is one of leader in this sector. But again, the net export figure for Europe as a whole has gone down a lot. And again, this is an indication that the domestic demand is exceeding production capacity, and so our net export in the foreseeable future to deficit. Finally, we can close with the public support for the transition. So here we have on the left import dependency vis-a-vis state aid. Here you can see that Germany is clearly an outlier, is the country with state aid above Europe. While on the right, this is bit speculative graph in the sense that Kakulaki et al. In a paper try to estimate the potential for green energy in our sector for all EU countries, and then we estimated the adaptive capabilities of what we are producing today, and so what the key message here is that the higher potential is where there is less state aid. The problem, because of course, when do you have the most potential for creating renewables energy? There is no big support. And of course, these are also the countries which face the most, have the lower fiscal space, and so it's also more difficult for them to put more. So we will now go very briefly on different policies that have been taken at the EU and national level. So since 2019, we have seen a lot of focus on energy and decarbonization among four major directives. So the first one is the new budget, which addresses which almost 40% of total resources are will go to the transition. Then we have the Repowering EU, which has been introduced in the National Recovery and Resilience Plan for different states. So, for example, for Italy, it was €1 billion allocated to Repowering EU. Then we have a number of policies which try to address batteries, which, as I showed you before, are produced only in 600 countries now, but are part of the EU strategy position. And in this respect, the EU signed in the last 2 or 3 years a number of strategic partnership programs with countries outside the EU to supplying key critical raw materials and in general to increase the resilience of this supply chain. And finally, a number of programs looking at the inclusive transition and social equity, which never do not have grip. Since 2021, there have been also a number of national policies to shield others from the energy crisis, with more than 600 billion euro allocated across European member states to shield the private sector and the energy costs. Of course, countries, as usual in Europe, do follow different strategies. So while you have, for example, Denmark and Sweden offering income support measures targeted in particular at the vulnerable groups, other countries opted for targeted price distorting measures, which are tax cuts in general, or excises, duties, and these. Finally, you have another of countries like Germany and Austria, which favored more a mixed strategies of both income support measures and targeted and untargeted. So to close with this, are the key elements to take on from the report. So the first one is a very strong heterogeneity in terms of resilience and vulnerability among countries. Second, then there is a large share of which shows quite a strong vulnerability, and this is mostly in the so-called core and in the Eastern European countries, which are of the German manufacture. Third, there is a relevant divide concerning the share of renewables, with Nordic countries outpacing most of the southern periphery and here. On the looking at the relative advantages, that Nordic countries do have an advantage relative on countries in the south. Technologies, which is in outlier in sense. Finally, there is a very large core periphery divide in terms of public support for this transition. With, of course, countries with higher fiscal space, which will be more prone to do this investment in the coming year. Finally, looking instead at the policies that we face at the national and the Euro level, there are some problems. Well, the first one is that the objectives of the policies are not so clear, and then that the enforcement mechanisms are not so strong. So it's difficult, for example, so if partnership on supply chains, it's difficult to force regulations that we have along the world supply chain from South America, where the are taken from, down to. Also, in this sense, there is risks in terms of duplication of efforts between regional and EU level. There is a lot of overlap in the policies. This can make EU investment in total multi. Finally, what is about to happen in the future? So, as you have seen, there was large support for household firms in the last years, but that was because the fiscal rules were suspended. So Italy, Portugal, and Spain could place large support packages for household firms. This will be most likely no longer possible. With the new fiscal framework that just came back in. So again, this creates a lot of risk in general, and especially for the countries which need it the most, because we have seen the countries in the south have the highest capability of most, but these are also the same countries which have the lower fiscal space and will have the lower resources in the coming years to foster the